Alright guys, so we have several updates regarding the FF7 Remake. The big one, of course, being that this first game that's releasing next year, March 3rd, 2020, is actually taking place entirely inside of Midgar. This has been a rumor for a very long time. A lot of people were thinking this was going to happen. A lot of people didn't think it was going to happen. I've been an advocate for it for a long time. I've been saying, if you guys have been around for a while, you know, I've been saying this from the beginning, that I want a fully fleshed out Midgar. I'm fine with the first game taking place entirely inside of Midgar. That means it's like a completely explorable city. And we also learned from Yoshinori Kitase during their E3 presentation that they're expecting this game to be 2 discs, 2 Blu-ray discs of like content for the first game. And if it's taking place entirely inside of Midgar, this pretty much means to me that we might be able to explore the entirety of Midgar. And off the top of my head, I don't even know any other games from this console generation that require multiple discs to play. If there are any, be sure and let me know in the comments below. But that's something that's very intriguing and very promising, because you can see some games like Witcher 3, for example, that came out this generation that is just packed full of content, and it's only a single disc. This afternoon at E3 in Los Angeles, I watched an extended demo of the Final Fantasy VII Remake and got my hands on a build for about 15 minutes. Here's the good news. It could be really special. The bad news, we have no idea when the whole project will be completed. And before we continue, that's part of the issue here, is it's taken them this long to finish the very first game. The very first game's taken place entirely inside of Midgar, and it's taken 2 discs of content to make. And that's just the Midgar segment, which is a very small portion of the game, which Jason Schreier is going to touch on in a second. It's a very small fraction of the game, to be honest. You can be outside of Midgar in the original game just a handful of hours if you know what you're doing. And it's taken them this long just to complete that. So who knows how long it's going to take them to complete the entirety of the FF7 story. We can't reveal that many details about this, producer Yoshinori Kitase said when I asked him today how many games will be in this series. We know that the first one is set entirely in Midgar, and that, according to Square Enix, it's the size of an entire numbered Final Fantasy game. A radical reimagining, given that Midgar was maybe 5 to 10% of the original game on PlayStation 1. Before we actually started working on this, we knew it was going to be a large amount of content, Kitase told a group of press. When we started out planning the plot for the first game, it hit us again. At that point, we decided we were going to focus first game on Midgar and what happens in Midgar. Unfortunately, we can't say anything more about the future games because we don't know ourselves. Kitase added that the development team is simultaneously finishing Final Fantasy VII Remake's first game, which is out in March 2020, while planning game number 2. And see, that part right there is kind of a downer, man. It's taken them like 4 to 5 years or more to finally get this first game done. And they don't even know anything about the second game. They're in the planning stages of the second game. Like, are we going to have to wait like 4 to 5 years in between every single game? If so, that's going to be a bit of a problem, man. Let's look at it like this. Let's say there's 3 games in this FF7 remake, and there's 4 years between each of them. You're looking at least another 8 years before the entire project's complete. In 8 years, I'm going to be in my mid-30s, dude. Like, that's a long fucking time to wait. The best way to describe the Final Fantasy VII remake is fleshed out. It's like the PS1 version of Final Fantasy VII was an outline, and this is the final paper. Whereas in the original game, you'd see a few dialogue exchanges that were meant to broadly convey feelings, Jessie being flirty, Barrett trying to convince Cloud that the environment is worth saving. Here there are fleshed out conversations, genuine personality, and dialogue with a surprising amount of warmth. There are some clunky lines in there, but it's fun to watch. Here's one exchange I particularly enjoyed. Barrett, you gonna stand there and pretend you can't hear the planet crying out in pain? Cloud, you really hear that? Barrett, damn straight I do. Cloud, after a pause, get help. I'm sure that scene is much better when it's actually seen in-game and not read by me, but this is a good indication that they are sticking to Cloud's personality early game. He seems like an asshole right there. Like, you know, Barrett's being serious, like, man, the planet's dying. Can you not hear its cries? And he's like, get help, you crazy ass. And that's exactly how Cloud was early game. He's just a dick. We've seen this also with the trailer we got prior to E3 when the members of Avalanche are kind of questioning whether or not what they're doing is bad. Cloud just says, what's done is done.
This couldn't have been us. But what if it was? What's done is done.
This is another positive for the game. Hopefully this means they're sticking to the personalities of the characters from the original game as well. Yuffie should be funny, Vincent should be dark and brooding, Sid should also be an asshole. Jessie, a member of Barrett's Avalanche Eco-Terrorist group, has more dialogue in the 30 minutes of footage I saw today than she does in all of Final Fantasy VII on PS1. Wedge and Biggs have more personality. There are cutscenes around every corner. It feels like a completely new game. This, I think, is very, very good because, spoiler warning, those three characters die in the original game, and it's not very impactful. You don't get to really learn who these characters are. You don't get to see them that much, and then they're just dead before you even leave Midgar. And it's like, okay, that wasn't really that impactful. This is a lot better. We're going to get to see these characters talk a lot more, learn who they are as people a lot more, and then inevitably, if they stick to the original game, they're going to die. And hopefully it means something this time. The combat system is also brand new. Here are the basics. As Cloud, you can slash, evade, and block with button presses. With every attack, you'll build up your ATB gauge, and every time you fill up an ATB bar to a maximum of 2 in the demo, you can use it for a spell, ability, or item. This version of Cloud was equipped with some skills like Braver, formerly a limit break, now regular ability, and a triple slashing ability that sends him spinning from enemy to enemy. There's also a stagger system reminiscent of Final Fantasy XIII, in which you can build up an enemy's staggered gauge. When it fills up, you'll do bonus damage 160% in the demo. I mentioned this with my E3 recap. Didn't Final Fantasy XV have something like a stagger system as well? I can't remember. It's been a long time since I played that game. But 13 definitely did have a stagger system, and I don't know why you'd bring that back, why you'd do anything related to FF13. Like, that game was, at least the first game, was so poorly received. Never played the second or the third. Don't get me wrong at all, I'm not against the stagger system in FF7 Remake, I'm all for it, whatever, I just want to play the damn game, but it seems like a weird mechanic to bring back from kind of a poorly received Final Fantasy game. As a result of this system, it doesn't feel like a hack-and-slash action game. It's got a very, very different vibe than, say, Kingdom Hearts 3. Just mashing the square button doesn't seem like an effective strategy in Final Fantasy VII's new combat system. You don't do a ton of damage with standard attacks. From what I watched and played, getting through fights requires frequent use of abilities and swapping between your characters. In this case, using Cloud to take out short-range enemies and Barret to gun down sentries from a distance. I like the sound of this right here because it seems like you're going to be put into certain situations where you're almost forced to use other characters, and I think that's great because we've seen in some of the gameplay, like with the Guard Scorpion, for example, where it like jumps and like crawls up the walls of the Mako reactor, and unless you use, I guess, magic with Cloud, you can't attack that. You can't use your sword, right? But Barret, if you swap over to Barret, he has a gun arm. You can use that. You can fight enemies at a range with that. I'm sure if you have the right materia set up, you can use any character to fight any enemy, but I think it's kind of interesting that at certain points you might have to use other characters. From here he goes on to talk about the music, which is fine. I'm interested in the music of the game, but it's not a major focus for me. But he does point out that Square says that the remake is coming to PlayStation 4 first, so that still seems to be the narrative that they're using. And to this day, we still don't know what that actually means. They've never outright said. Like, play it first on PlayStation 4 pretty much insinuates that it's coming to other platforms, maybe just PC, maybe also Xbox One. And it's something that I hope they clear up within the next year, that way we know. Like, I need to know if I have to get a PS4, or if it's going to launch on Xbox One as well, or if it's going to, like, launch on PS4 for, like, a month or two before every other platform. Like, tell us what the hell is going on exactly, so I know what the hell to do. And that's pretty much the gist of this article. The main thing, of course, was the fact that the first game is, in fact, taking place entirely inside of Midgar. That's pretty crucial information. That's something that we were wondering for a long time, and now we know. What's crazy to think about is how the hell are they going to expand the entirety of the Midgar segment into a full game that requires 2 discs to play on? That's something that, even if you expand everything that happens in the Midgar segments and give it, voice dialogue and other things like that, and extend the scenes a little bit, that still doesn't really equate to a full game, which is why I think, and given the fact that there's 2 discs, that we might be able to explore a lot, if not all of Midgar, which is all I've ever wanted. That's all I care about at this point right now. That also lets us know that we're not going to see an overworld in the first game because we're not going to be leaving Midgar in the first game, which is good to know. At least we got that out of the way with the first game, to know whether or not it's going to be an overworld, whether we're going to explore the entire planet or not with the first game. Now we know that's not going to be the case. But that makes you curious if they're trying to get all the Midgar stuff into one game, how the rest of the game is going to be. Like, how, Midgar is going to be this crazy big location. Like, what about other towns like Junon or Costa del Sol or just Calm or something like that? Like, how big are those locations going to be now, too? Or the damn Gold Saucer. I think that one's high up on a lot of people's list, man. Like, I'm so curious how they're going to handle that location. Anyways, guys, that's the video. I'll have the article linked in the description below if you want to check it out for yourselves. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. If you did, give it a thumbs up. Subscribe to the channel if you guys are new and want to stay up to date with more Final Fantasy VII Remake content. Turn on notifications. Follow me on Twitter at @the-David. And my Discord. Links to social networks are in the description. Into the outro. Later, guys.
Give me forever for a while, give me forever for a while. Quit acting like a baby, or at least less like a